Welcome, dear listener. Find a comfortable place to rest and let the noise of the day slowly fade away. Tonight, you're invited to a quiet village beneath soft rain, where an old clock tower watches over the night with patience and calm. There's nothing you need to do, nowhere you need to go. Just listen, breathe gently, and allow this story to guide you into rest. Take a slow, gentle breath in, and as you breathe out, allow the weight of the day to soften just a little. There is no rush here, no expectations, only the quiet comfort of this moment and the calm space you've given yourself by being here. Imagine a small village resting beneath a wide, cloud-brushed sky. Night has arrived slowly, without ceremony, wrapping rooftops and narrow lanes in a tender hush. Rain falls in a steady, patient rhythm, not loud, not urgent, just enough to soften every edge of sound. Each drop seems to land with care, smoothing the world into something kinder, quieter, easier to hold. Above the village, rising gently from the center like a familiar guardian, stands an old clock tower. Its stone walls are cool and pale, worn smooth by decades of weather and time. Soft golden light glows from its narrow windows, diffused by the rain and mist, making the tower feel less like a structure and more like a presence, calm, steady, and deeply reassuring. The clock does not hurry. It never has. Its hands move slowly, deliberately, as if time itself has learned to breathe here. Each quiet tick blends into the rain, becoming part of the village's lullaby. Nothing is demanded of you beneath this sound. You don't need to count the seconds. You don't need to follow the minutes. Time here exists simply to cradle the night. Below, the village sleeps. Windows glow faintly behind curtains. Cobblestone streets shine with reflected lamplight, and the air smells of rain, stone, and clean earth. Somewhere far off, water trickles along a gutter, and the sound feels soothing rather than sharp, like a whispered reassurance that everything is exactly as it should be. As you listen, your thoughts are invited to slow. They don't need to disappear. They can rest one by one, like leaves settling gently onto water. The clock tower watches over all of this in quiet patience. It has seen countless nights like this, nights filled with rain, reflection, and rest. It knows that nothing needs fixing right now. Nothing needs solving. The night is here to hold you, not challenge you. And as you imagine yourself standing somewhere below that tower, perhaps beneath a small awning, or beside a rain-dampened stone wall, you can feel the calm beginning to settle in your body. Your shoulders loosen. Your breathing finds its own soft rhythm. Tonight's story will move slowly. It will follow gentle paths. It will never rush you. For now, simply stay here, beneath the quiet clock tower, in the rainy village, wrapped in calm, and let the night begin to unfold. The rain had been falling for hours, though no one in the village seemed to mind. It arrived the way familiar things do, quietly, without announcement, until every rooftop glistened and every stone path reflected the soft amber glow of lantern light. The village lay tucked between low hills and whispering trees, its houses clustered together as if for warmth, their chimneys dark and resting for the night. At the very center of it all rose the clock tower. It stood taller than any roof, taller even than the oldest oak at the edge of the square, yet it never felt imposing. Its stone walls were pale and smooth from decades of rain, wind, and patient moonlight. Moss clung gently to its lower edges, and thin streams of water traced slow paths down its surface, like quiet thoughts finding their way home. The clock face glowed softly through the mist, not bright, never bright, but warm enough to be seen from every corner of the village. Its numbers were wide and welcoming, and its hands moved with deliberate calm, never hurried, never late. Inside the tower, the clock ticked, not loudly, not sharply. Each tick blended into the rain, into the night, into the soft breathing of the sleeping village. It was a sound meant not to measure time, but to soothe it. Below the tower, the village square lay empty. Rain tapped gently against wooden benches and pooled in shallow reflections. The fountain at the center had long been turned off for the season, but rainwater gathered in its basin, rippling with each drop, catching distorted reflections of lanterns and sky. Somewhere nearby, a door clicked softly as a late traveler stepped inside, seeking warmth. Somewhere else, a curtain shifted as someone turned in their sleep. These sounds were faint, distant, unimportant, and that was exactly what made them comforting. Nothing demanded attention here. The clock tower had been watching over the village for as long as anyone could remember. Older villagers spoke of it as if it were alive, not in a magical sense, but in the way a mountain or a river feels alive simply by existing. It had seen storms come and go. It had counted winters and summers without ever growing tired. And on nights like this, when rain softened every sound, it seemed to lean slightly closer to the village, as if listening. Inside the tower, the air was cool and smelled faintly of stone, old wood, and rain. A narrow spiral staircase wound upward along the inner wall, each step worn smooth by countless feet over the years. Lanterns were mounted at regular intervals, their glass panes fogged slightly by the damp night air, casting warm circles of light that overlapped like gentle thoughts. The climb was slow, intentionally so. No one ever rushed up the clock tower stairs. It was understood, without explanation. that this was a place for patience. At the top, just below the clock mechanism itself, was a small room, simple, quiet, and rarely visited. Wooden beams crossed the ceiling, darkened by age. A narrow window looked out over the village, its glass speckled with rain. From here, the world below felt softer, farther away, as if wrapped in layers of calm. The clock's inner workings filled the space with a steady presence. Gears moved with quiet confidence, metal touching metal with careful precision. Each movement was smooth, unforced, as though the clock had learned long ago that there was no need to hurry. Time here did not rush forward. It rested. It flowed gently. Outside, rain continued its patient descent. It traced the edges of rooftops, slid along window panes, and gathered in small streams that followed familiar paths down stone steps and along narrow lanes. The village had grown accustomed to this sound, so accustomed that it barely registered anymore. For many, rain meant comfort. It meant an excuse to stay inside, to curl beneath blankets, to let thoughts slow without guilt. It meant that the world outside would be quieter, softer, easier to ignore. The clock tower understood this. Its light seemed warmer on rainy nights, its ticking slower, though in truth it never changed. But perception mattered more than precision here, and the village perceived comfort. Down one of the narrow streets leading away from the square, small houses leaned gently toward each other, their wooden doors dark with moisture. Flower boxes rested beneath windowsills, their leaves heavy with droplets that occasionally fell in soft taps to the ground below. A single lantern burned at the corner of the street, its light diffused by rain and mist, creating a halo that made the air itself seem to glow. Beneath it, puddles reflected the lantern's warmth, trembling slightly with each raindrop. Somewhere, a cat slept beneath a sheltered step. Somewhere, a kettle cooled on a stove. Somewhere, a dream unfolded slowly, uninterrupted. The clock tower watched it all. It did not judge. It did not intervene. It simply marked the passage of moments with gentle consistency. Each tick was an invitation to breathe. As the night deepened, the rain softened further. Its rhythm slowed, spacing itself out, as if even the clouds had decided to rest. The village sank deeper into stillness, the kind that feels full rather than empty. From the tower's high window, the hills beyond the village were barely visible, their shapes softened by fog. Trees swayed slightly, their leaves whispering to one another in voices too quiet to disturb the peace. This was not a night for action. It was a night for presence. The clock tower had no need to announce the hour loudly. It trusted that those who needed to know would feel it instead. A subtle shift in the air, a gentle deepening of calm. Inside the tower, the gears continued their slow dance, perfectly aligned, perfectly content. They had done this for years and would do it for many more without complaint. Outside, the rain traced one last silver line down the clock face, catching the light before slipping away into darkness. And below, the village rested, safe beneath the quiet clock tower's watch, wrapped in rain, time, and an unspoken promise that nothing needed to happen tonight. Nothing at all? The rain did not stop. It never truly stopped on nights like this. It only changed its pace, its softness, its intention. Sometimes it whispered. Sometimes it barely touched the ground at all, drifting down like a memory instead of weather. From the clock tower's height, the village felt like a breathing thing. You could almost sense it rising and falling with each quiet moment. A collective inhale, a collective release. Roofs gleamed gently, and the narrow lanes between houses looked like ribbons of shadow and reflected light. Water traced familiar paths, following the slight slopes worn into stone by generations of footsteps. The clock tower had learned every one of those paths. It remembered when the square was first paved, when the fountain was new and loud, when laughter filled the air even at night. It remembered seasons of celebration and seasons of silence. And now, in this moment, it held the present with the same care it had always shown the past. Inside the tower, the ticking continued. Tick, pauser, tick. Each sound arrived exactly when it meant to, then dissolved back into quiet. There was no urgency here, no counting down, no pushing forward. Time simply existed like rain on stone. The lanterns inside the tower flickered slightly as a gentle draft moved through the narrow window. Rain, cooled air slipped in, carrying the clean scent of wet earth and leaves. The wooden beams creaked softly, not in complaint, but in acknowledgement, like an old house settling deeper into comfort. The staircase curved downward in a slow spiral, its steps dark and smooth. Long ago, people climbed these stairs daily, caretakers, bell ringers, curious children. Now, visits were rare, but the tower did not mind. It was content to stand quietly, doing what it had always done, listening. Outside, the village square glowed faintly. The lanterns were spaced just far enough apart to leave pockets of shadow between them. Shadows that felt gentle, not empty. Rain softened every edge, rounding sharp corners, blurring lines, until everything felt more forgiving. The fountain basin reflected the clock face above, its image wavering with each raindrop. Time itself seemed to ripple there, bending slightly, refusing to hold a single shape. A soft breeze moved through the square, stirring fallen leaves into slow, lazy spirals. They gathered near doorways and benches, settling where they pleased. Nothing chased them away. Somewhere beyond the hills, thunder murmured faintly, not close enough to startle, only distant enough to remind the world that storms existed elsewhere. Here, the rain was gentle. Here, the night was kind. In one of the houses near the square, a small lamp burned beside a window. Its light was low, warm. Inside, someone slept deeply, their breathing slow and even. Perhaps they had fallen asleep listening to the rain. Perhaps they had stopped listening long ago, letting it fade into the background of rest. The clock tower noticed these things. It noticed when lights went out one by one. It noticed when footsteps stopped echoing through the streets. It noticed when the village fully surrendered to sleep. And when it did, the tower seemed to relax just a little more, its presence softening like a guardian who knows the night is peaceful. Higher up, behind the clock face, the mechanism moved with practiced ease. Brass gears turned smoothly, polished by time rather than effort. The pendulum swung in its slow, reassuring arc, steady and unwavering. Left, left, its motion felt almost like breathing. Below, rain slid from the edge of the clock face and fell toward the square, joining countless other droplets on their quiet journey downward. Each one landed somewhere different, a roof tile, a leaf, a stone step, yet all were part of the same rhythm. The village did not rush them. Along the outer streets, where houses thinned and gardens grew wider, rain collected on hedges and fences. It weighed down branches gently, bending them just enough to feel held. The earth drank deeply, content with the gift. In the fields beyond, tall grass shimmered under the moonlight, each blade tipped with silver. The wind moved through it in waves, slow and hypnotic, as if the land itself was drifting toward sleep. The clock tower could see all of this, not with eyes, but with familiarity. It knew the way sound changed when rain fell, how footsteps softened, how voices lowered, how even thoughts seemed to slow, losing their sharp edges. This was the tower's quiet gift to the village, not timekeeping, not bells, but calm. As the night stretched on, minutes blended seamlessly into one another. No one marked them. No one needed to. The clock continued its work without asking for attention. Tick, pause, tick. Each sound was a reminder that nothing was being demanded of the moment. Inside the tower room, a thin layer of dust rested undisturbed on shelves and ledges. It smelled faintly of old paper, wood, and stone, a comforting scent, untouched by hurry. The lantern light warmed the space, just enough to feel welcoming, never bright enough to wake. Rain tapped gently against the small window, a quiet conversation between sky and glass. Occasionally, A drop would slide down slowly, catching the light before disappearing from view. The village below lay still. Dreams unfolded softly behind closed doors. Some were vivid, some barely remembered, some simply feelings without images. All of them moved at their own pace, unhurried and safe. The clock tower held them all within its steady presence. It did not rush the night toward morning. It did not pull the hours forward. It allowed the darkness to linger, to stretch, to cradle the village in rest. And as the rain continued its gentle work, smoothing sounds, softening edges, easing the world into quiet, the clock tower remained where it had always been. Above the village, within the rain, keeping time, not as something to chase, but as something to rest inside. The rain continued its patient conversation with the village, as if it had all the time in the world. It did not hurry the night forward, nor did it linger out of hesitation. It simply fell one drop at a time, creating a soft rhythm that settled deep into the stones, the rooftops, and the quiet hearts beneath them. From the clock tower, the village appeared wrapped in a kind of gentle listening. Nothing moved without intention. Even the rain seemed to choose where it landed, touching old tiles, wooden shutters, and cobblestone paths with equal care. Each surface responded differently. Roofs sang softly, leaves sighed. Stone accepted the water in silence. Inside the tower, the pendulum continued its slow arc, steady and calm. The sound it made was not loud enough to demand attention, only present enough to be felt. It was the kind of sound that reminded you that something reliable existed nearby. Below, the square rested peacefully. A narrow street leading away from the square curved between houses, its lamps glowing like small, patient moons. The rain made the street shine, turning it into a ribbon of amber light. No footsteps disturbed it now. No voices echoed there. The street belonged entirely to the night. Somewhere near the edge of the village, a cat moved beneath a covered doorway, curling itself into warmth and stillness. Its breathing slowed, sensing unconsciously with the steady fall of rain. Even the smallest lives found comfort in the quiet. The clock tower noticed this too. It noticed the way the rain softened boundaries, how it blurred the difference between near and far, between inside and outside. The night felt closer because of it, as though the sky had lowered itself to sit beside the village. Within the tower's walls, the air felt slightly cooler, touched by moisture and stone. The scent of rain mingled with old wood and time-worn metal. It was a scent that suggested safety rather than age, familiarity rather than decay. The clock face gleamed faintly as water traced slow paths across it. Numbers reflected the lantern light from below, appearing almost to float. Time, for once, felt weightless. Minutes passed unnoticed. Somewhere inside one of the houses, a kettle rested forgotten on a stove, long cooled. In another, a book lay open on a bedside table, its reader already deep in sleep. The rain folded these moments into itself, holding them gently. The village did not dream loudly. Its dreams were small and soft, memories of warm kitchens, long walks, quiet laughter. Nothing sharp intruded, nothing urgent demanded attention. The night was doing its quiet work. The clock tower, standing watch, felt no need to intervene. Long ago, the bell inside the tower had marked every hour with authority. Its voice once carried across fields and hills, announcing time as something firm and unyielding. Now, the bell rested in silence, content to let the night remain unbroken. Silence here was not empty. It was full of presence. The rain spoke in layers, on stone, on wood, on leaves, each sound overlapping gently, never competing. Together, they formed a blanket of sound that wrapped around the village, tucking it in. Even the wind moved carefully, slipping between buildings and through narrow alleys without disturbance. It carried the scent of wet soil and distant trees, reminding the village of the land beyond its lights. From the tower's height, fields stretched outward like dark waves. Rain brushed over them, flattening tall grass momentarily before it rose again. The earth responded with gratitude, absorbing the water slowly, deeply. Time continued its steady walk, tick, pause, tick. Each moment arrived and left without announcement. Inside the tower room, shadows shifted slightly as the lantern flame moved. The wooden beams overhead seemed to breathe with the night, expanding and contracting just enough to be felt rather than heard. The staircase remained empty. It waited without expectation. The rain seemed to slow further, as though aware that nothing required speed. Droplets fell farther apart now, giving each one room to land, to be heard, to fade. In the square, the fountain overflowed gently, water slipping over its edge and joining the rain below. The sound it made was barely distinguishable from rainfall itself, blending seamlessly into the night's lullaby. Somewhere distant, a clock chimed once, not from this tower, but from another place, another rhythm. The sound reached the village faintly, softened by rain and distance, and then disappeared. The clock tower did not respond. It kept its own time, quiet and personal. Within the village, sleep deepened, breaths slowed, muscles relaxed, thoughts untangled themselves naturally, no longer pulled by worry or anticipation. The rain carried those thoughts away, drop by drop, until only rest remained. The tower felt this shift like a subtle change in temperature. The village had crossed fully into night. The lanterns below dimmed slightly, their light diffused by moisture. Reflections stretched longer across the stones, creating pathways of glow that led nowhere in particular. They existed simply to exist. Rain slid from window ledges and gutters in steady lines, tracing gravity's gentle pull. It found its way into drains and channels, disappearing beneath the village, continuing its journey unseen. Nothing resisted it. The clock tower stood, patient and unchanging, its presence a quiet promise. As long as it remained, the village would always have something watching over its nights, not guarding against danger, not counting down to morning, just witnessing. Above, clouds shifted slowly, revealing a pale moon that watched the village with equal calm. Its light filtered through rain, softening further, turning the world into something dreamlike. The tower stones held the moonlight briefly before letting it go, and as the rain continued, slower now, gentler, the village rested fully within the night's embrace, wrapped in sound, shadow, and the quiet reassurance of time that asked nothing in return. The rain did not end. It simply changed its tone, as if it had leaned closer to the village and lowered its voice. The drops became softer, more spaced apart, each one arriving with intention rather than urgency. Between them, silence stretched gently, like a long, calm breath. Inside that silence, the village felt held. Windows glowed faintly behind thin curtains. Inside those rooms, warmth lingered, the kind that comes from lamps left on low, from blankets pulled a little higher, from the quiet understanding that there is nowhere else to be tonight. The rain tapped lightly at the glass, not to be let in, only to be heard. The clock tower listened. Its stones had absorbed centuries of weather, each season leaving a trace too subtle to see but easy to feel. Tonight's rain joined that memory, settling into cracks and edges, becoming part of the tower's long awareness. The pendulum continued its slow, faithful arc. Tick, rest, tick. Time here was not a line moving forward. It felt more like a circle, returning again and again to the same peaceful center. Below, the village square breathed quietly. Puddles deepened just enough to reflect the lanterns fully now. Light shimmered with every small ripple, bending gently as raindrops touched the surface and vanished. A bench near the fountain stood empty, damp and shining. It remembered the warmth of daytime sun, the weight of people resting there earlier, conversations that had drifted away. Now it welcomed only rain, accepting it without resistance. Along the narrow streets, doors were closed but not locked tightly. The village trusted the night. It always had. Nothing here needed to be defended against. The rain itself felt like a guardian, softening edges, smoothing corners, quieting everything that might otherwise intrude. Somewhere, a clock inside a home marked the hour quietly, its sound swallowed almost immediately by rain. Even time indoors seemed to move more gently tonight. The tower's clock face glowed on, unchanged. It did not hurry the village toward morning. It did not count down. It simply remained present, a constant among shifting sounds and reflections. The wind paused. For a moment, the rain fell straight down, uninterrupted. That stillness felt intentional, like a shared pause between breaths. In that space, the village settled even deeper into rest. Thoughts loosened. If there had been worries earlier, they had softened now, edges rounded by the steady rhythm of water. The mind found fewer places to cling to tension. Everything important had already been done. Everything else could wait. The rain understood this. It carried the unnecessary weight away, down gutters and into the earth, where it dissolved into soil and roots and quiet growth. Inside the tower, the lantern flame flickered once, then steadied. Shadows shifted slightly across the stone walls, stretching and shrinking in slow motion. Nothing abrupt, nothing demanding attention. The staircase remained empty, but it felt welcoming rather than abandoned. Each step held the memory of careful footsteps, of pauses taken halfway, up to listen to the rain through narrow windows. The bell above stayed silent, content to let the night speak instead. Farther out, beyond the village lights, fields absorbed the rain with patience. Water pooled briefly, then disappeared into the ground, feeding seeds unseen. Growth began quietly, without announcement. The village did not need to know this. It trusted the process. Clouds drifted slowly now, opening small spaces where moonlight slipped through. The light touched rooftops and streets in pale strokes, blending with lantern glow and rain, slick reflections. Nothing stood alone. Everything softened into everything else. The clock tower watched the moon move almost imperceptibly. Minutes passed unnoticed. The rain slowed again, becoming almost a whisper. Each drop felt deliberate, as though placed rather than falling. The night stretched comfortably, with no urgency to change. Somewhere beneath the village, water flowed through old channels, carved long ago to guide rain safely away. Even these unseen paths played their part, quietly carrying sound and motion beneath sleeping streets. The tower approved. It had seen many nights like this, though each one felt new in its own way. Rain was never exactly the same twice. Tonight's carried a gentleness that lingered longer, like a hand resting reassuringly on the village's shoulder. Inside homes, sleep deepened further. Dreams became slower, softer, less defined. They drifted rather than moved, images blending gently without sharp edges or sudden turns. The rain matched this pace. Drop by drop it continued, neither beginning nor ending, simply existing alongside the village. Together, they created a space where nothing needed to happen. Time continued its quiet arc. Tick, pause, tick. And within that rhythm, the village rested fully, wrapped in rain, watched over by the silent clock tower, safe in the knowledge that this moment asked for nothing more than stillness. The rain became a presence rather than a sound. It no longer announced itself with individual drops or gentle taps. Instead, it settled into the village like a soft blanket, lowering the edges of the world and smoothing everything it touched. Even the spaces between sounds felt full now, filled with calm, with patience, with a quiet kind of understanding. The clock tower stood within this calm, as if it had always belonged to it. Inside the tower, the air was cool and steady. Stone walls held the day's warmth just enough to keep the night from feeling cold. The lantern's glow rested gently against the walls, revealing textures shaped by time, tiny grooves, softened corners, marks left by hands long gone. The pendulum continued its slow journey. Each swing felt less like movement and more like reassurance. Time here did not push forward. It simply flowed, like rainwater finding its way through familiar paths. From the narrow windows, the village appeared slightly blurred now, softened by mist and drifting rain. Lantern light stretched across wet cobblestones, turning each street into a ribbon of gold and shadow. Reflections trembled faintly, responding to distant footsteps that never came. Everything was still, yet nothing felt empty. The tower seemed to breathe, not with lungs, but with memory. It remembered mornings filled with bells and voices, afternoons warmed by sunlight, evenings like this one, when the village folded inward and rested. All of these moments lived together within its stones, layered gently, never competing. Tonight, the quiet had chosen to rise to the surface. Below, the village moved in its sleep, not physically, but emotionally settling, releasing, letting go. Thoughts that had circled earlier in the evening loosened their grip. Questions drifted without needing answers. Worries softened into distant shapes, no longer sharp enough to hold attention. Rain helped with this. It carried sound away, blurring edges, turning even memory into something gentler. The mind, listening to it, learned to slow its own rhythm. Inside one small house near the square, a kettle cooled on the stove, forgotten and content to be so. In another, a book lay open on a table, its pages barely stirring as the air shifted. Lamps hummed quietly, their light dim but steady. The village trusted the night to hold these things. Back in the tower, a small shelf held objects no one had touched in years. an old oil tin, a folded cloth, a notebook whose pages had yellowed softly. These items were not abandoned. They were simply resting, like everything else. The clock face outside continued to glow, visible from every corner of the village. It did not demand attention. It offered orientation, a gentle reminder that time existed, even if it didn't need to be followed right now. The rain thinned again, turning into a fine mist that hovered briefly before settling. Street gutters murmured quietly as water passed through them, their voices low and unhurried. Somewhere beyond the fields, a stream swelled slightly, welcoming the rain without protest. It moved slower now, fuller, deeper, its surface smooth except where raindrops touched and disappeared. Nothing hurried. The night stretched. Within that stretch, awareness softened. There was no need to name thoughts, no need to chase them. They passed through gently, like clouds drifting behind the clock tower's face, visible for a moment before fading into the dark. Breathing slowed, naturally, without instruction. In the village square, the fountain collected rain in its shallow basin, the water surface barely moving. Lantern light shimmered across it in slow patterns, repeating and repeating, until repetition itself became soothing. The clock tower noticed these patterns. It noticed everything, not with judgment, but with calm acceptance. It had learned long ago that every moment arrived exactly as it should and left when it was ready. The bell above remained still, its silence deliberate and kind. Even silence had layers tonight, the hush of rain, the pause between drops, the soft echo of water moving unseen. These layers wrapped around the village, creating depth without weight. Inside the tower, shadows lengthened slightly as the lantern burned lower. The flame did not flicker now. It burned steadily, confident it would last through the night. Time moved on. Rest, tick. Each sound blended seamlessly into the next until it was no longer distinct. The rhythm existed, but it did not ask to be counted. The rain eased once more, leaving behind a world washed clean and gently glowing. Surfaces shone softly. Air felt lighter. The village breathed more deeply, as if reassured by the rain's careful attention. Above it all, the clock tower remained quiet, steady, present, and within its watch, the village rested completely, held by time, softened by rain, and free to drift deeper into calm. The clock tower held the night gently, as if it were something fragile and precious. Time inside the tower felt different now, not slower exactly, just softer. Moments no longer stacked themselves into urgency. They spread out instead, like warm light across a wooden floor, touching everything evenly. The rain returned in small, patient waves. It did not fall with intention. It drifted, settling wherever gravity allowed, touching stone, slate, wood, and earth without preference. Each drop carried its own quiet purpose, then disappeared, content to have been felt. From high above, the village looked like a constellation of resting thoughts. Roofs curved inward as if listening. Chimneys stood silent, no smoke rising, their work done for the evening. Windows glowed faintly, not brightly enough to interrupt the dark, just enough to suggest safety and warmth within. The clock tower had watched this village grow into itself. It remembered when the streets were rougher, when lanterns burned with uncertain flame, when the rain sounded louder because fewer things softened it. Over time, the village had learned how to receive the night, how to settle into it rather than resist it. Inside the tower, the pendulum continued its slow arc. Each movement felt like a breath taken on behalf of everything below. Swing, pause, return. Nothing hurried the motion. Nothing needed to. The walls seemed to hum faintly, not with sound, but with stored warmth and memory. Hands had once pressed against these stones, steady hands, careful hands, hands that understood patience. That understanding lingered here, absorbed into the very structure. Outside, puddles gathered in shallow hollows along the streets. They reflected the clock face in fragments, turning time into scattered circles of light. When rain touched these reflections, they rippled gently, bending the glow without breaking it. Even time was flexible tonight. The village square rested in perfect stillness. The benches sat empty, their wooden slats darkened by rain, smelling faintly of damp grain and old varnish. The fountain no longer flowed, only collected, its basin holding rainwater like a quiet promise. Somewhere nearby, a door shifted slightly as wind nudged it, then settled back into place. The sound was soft, unremarkable, and instantly absorbed by the night. Nothing startled, nothing needed attention. The clock tower observed without effort. It did not analyze or question. It simply noticed the way mist curled near the ground, the way rain softened corners, the way the village exhaled tension it had carried without realizing. This was the hour when thoughts loosened their grip. Worries that had once felt sharp now appeared rounded, distant, almost abstract. They floated through awareness briefly, then drifted away, replaced by quieter sensations, warmth, steadiness, the comfort of being held within something larger. The clock face glowed steadily. Its hands moved forward, but without insistence. Time continued because that was its nature, not because anyone demanded it. Inside one small home at the edge of the village, someone shifted in their sleep, then relaxed again, breathing deep and even. The rain tapped gently against the window, matching that rhythm, learning it, honoring it. In another house, a cat curled tighter on a cushion, tail tucked neatly, ears barely twitching at the sound of water outside. The world was safe enough to sleep deeply. The tower knew this. It had learned to recognize the subtle signs, the way the village's energy changed, the way sound thinned, the way even silence became layered and rich. Above, clouds drifted slowly, thick but untroubled. They carried the rain without urgency, releasing it when they were ready. The moon hid behind them, not absent, simply resting. The night felt complete. Inside the tower, dust motes floated lazily through the lantern's glow, turning slowly, unbothered by direction. They moved the way thoughts move just before sleep, gentle, unstructured, free. The pendulum passed them again and again, its shadow stretching and shrinking across the floor, marking time without measurement. Tick, rest, tick. The sound blended into the rain until neither could be separated. Outside, the fields beyond the village shimmered faintly under the moisture, grasses bending slightly, releasing the day's heat into the cool air. The earth welcomed the rain, drinking quietly, without demand. Somewhere farther still, the road leading away from the village lay empty. No footsteps approached, no wheels turned. The night had closed the chapter for now. The clock tower stood as a quiet guardian between moments. It did not protect through force, but through presence, through the simple act of remaining steady while everything else softened. The rain slowed again, spacing itself farther apart, as if careful not to disturb what it had helped create. Drops fell with intention now, each one distinct, each one gentle. A sense of ease settled deeper. There was nothing left to do, nothing left to resolve. The village had arrived at rest naturally, without instruction. Even the tower seemed to lean into stillness, its stones holding the quiet the way hands hold warmth. Time continued, yes, but it did so kindly, and beneath the soft glow of the clock face, wrapped in rain and calm, the village drifted further into peace, carried forward by nothing more than gentle rhythm and trust. The rain had thinned into something softer now, as if it had learned the village's breathing and chosen to follow it. Part 4 unfolded without effort, like a deeper layer of calm settling gently over everything that already felt at peace. The clock tower no longer felt tall or distant. It felt close, not in space, but in presence, as if it were leaning down slightly, listening more carefully to the world below. The stones, cooled by rain and time, held a quiet warmth inside them, the kind that doesn't fade quickly. Inside the tower, the lantern's glow remained steady. Its light did not reach far, but it didn't need to. It illuminated exactly what was necessary: the worn wood of the floor, the curve of the pendulum's path, the gentle dust drifting through the air. Nothing more asked to be seen. The pendulum continued its calm arc, but now its motion felt less like keeping time and more like guiding rest. Swing, settle, return. Each movement felt like reassurance. Below, the village had fully surrendered to night. Windows dimmed one by one, not abruptly, but gradually, as if households were easing themselves into sleep together in quiet agreement. The rain traced thin silver lines along rooftops, slipping into gutters, finding their way back to the earth. The sound was barely a sound now, more a texture, a softening presence that wrapped around corners and edges. The square rested under a veil of mist. Street lamps glowed through it like memories rather than lights, their edges blurred, their brightness gentle. The benches, the fountain, the cobblestones, everything seemed slightly distant, as though viewed through half-closed eyes. And yet, everything was clear in its own way. The clock tower observed a small shift, not in movement, but in feeling. This was the hour when the village stopped carrying itself. Responsibilities loosened their grip. Thoughts that had circled all day found places to rest. Even memories softened, losing their sharpness, becoming smooth and warm. Inside one home, a kettle sat forgotten on the stove, long since cooled. In another, a book lay open beside a chair, its reader asleep, fingers still marking the page. The stories could wait. They always could. The clock tower had learned something important over the years. Nothing truly urgent arrives at night. Night is not for solving. It is for settling. The rain had taught the village that. So had the seasons, the slow turning of days, the repetition of ordinary moments. Calm was not something to chase, it was something to allow. The clock face reflected faintly in the wet stone below the tower, a pale circle of light that trembled slightly with each passing drop of water. Time appeared there not as a line, but as a gentle pool. Inside the tower, the air felt thicker with quiet. Even the smallest sounds, the creak of old wood, the soft whisper of the pendulum's chain, seemed wrapped in softness, like they were moving through velvet rather than air. The tower itself felt content, not proud, not important, simply useful in the quietest way. It marked time so no one else had to. It held watch so others could rest. It stood so the village could sleep without wondering what came next. Outside, the fields beyond the village absorbed the last of the rain. The soil darkened, rich and receptive. The scent of wet earth drifted faintly upward, carried by a breeze so gentle it barely disturbed the mist. Somewhere far off, an owl shifted on its perch, feathers settling. The sound was small, almost imagined, and then gone. The night accepted it without comment. The clock tower noticed how even the rain seemed to listen now. Drops paused between falling. Silence stretched comfortably. When a drop finally landed, It did so with care, as though mindful of the stillness it entered. Time felt wide. There was space between seconds, room enough for breath, for rest, for the simple awareness of being here, warm, sheltered, unhurried. The tower's bell hung silent above, heavy and unmoving. It would not ring tonight. There was no need to announce anything. The hour belonged to quiet understanding, not sound. Below, the village streets gleamed softly, reflecting the lamps like distant stars scattered across the ground. Each reflection wavered slightly, then steadied, as if finding its place. Even the mist began to thin, lifting gently, revealing the shapes beneath it without rushing. The clock tower had seen many nights like this, yet each one felt new. Not because anything changed, but because rest always arrives differently, tailored to the moment, shaped by the day that came before it. Tonight's rest was deep, the kind that doesn't ask questions, the kind that settles into bones and stays. Inside the tower, the pendulum slowed just a fraction, not in speed, but in presence. Its movement felt heavier, more grounded, as though anchoring the night firmly in place. Swing, pause, return. The sound blended completely with the rain, with the wind, with the village's breathing. Everything belonged together. The clock tower stood, holding the center of this calm, not controlling it, not directing it, simply allowing it to be. And in that allowance, the village found itself wrapped in the most soothing phase of the night, where nothing pressed forward, nothing pulled back, and everything rested exactly where it needed to be. Time passed, gently, kindly, without demand. The rain no longer felt like something falling from the sky. It felt like something the night itself was breathing out, slowly, evenly, without effort. Part 5 began in that softened space where nothing needed to be added and nothing needed to be taken away. The clock tower stood exactly as it always had, yet it felt lighter now, as though the night had gently relieved it of even the smallest weight. The stones no longer held the day inside them. They had released it, letting cool calm settle deep into their core. Inside the tower, the lantern's flame flickered once, then steadied, glowing with a low, honeyed warmth. Its light traced familiar shapes, the curve of the stairs, the grain of the wood, the faint scratches left by centuries of quiet use. These marks were not signs of age, but of presence, proof that time had passed gently here. The pendulum continued its patient motion, not marking minutes, not counting seconds, just moving, like a lullaby without words. Below, the village had entered its deepest stillness. Even the occasional distant sound, a door settling, a branch shifting, seemed cushioned, wrapped in layers of quiet before it reached the air. The rain became finer still, almost mist-like, drifting rather than falling. Droplets clung to window panes and leaves, catching light and releasing it again. tiny reflections breathing in and out. The streets no longer reflected the lamps sharply. Everything blurred into softness, edges dissolving, shapes merging, light spreading instead of shining. The village felt as though it were being gently tucked in by the night itself. In one house, a clock on the wall ticked faintly, then stopped, not broken, just paused, as if choosing to rest until morning. No one noticed. Time did not mind. The clock tower noticed and approved. The tower had learned that stillness was not empty. It was full of rest, of quiet understanding, of moments that did not need to be remembered to matter. High above the village, clouds drifted slowly, their undersides glowing faintly with reflected lamplight. They moved without purpose, without direction, carried only by the softest currents of air. Everything moved like that now, without urgency, without expectation. The clock tower felt the night deepen, like a blanket pulled just a little higher. The air grew cooler, cleaner. Each breath felt slower than the last, as though the world itself was sighing in contentment. Inside the tower, dust motes settled completely. Nothing stirred them anymore. The air was so still it felt held. The pendulum sound softened further, becoming almost imagined. Swing, rest, return. Each motion seemed to say, "You are safe. You can let go." Below, the fields beyond the village disappeared into darkness, not sharply, but gradually. Their edges dissolved into shadow, then into calm. The earth rested, absorbing the rain, preparing quietly for another day it did not yet need to think about. The river near the village slowed its murmur, smoothing its surface, reflecting the sky like a long, dark ribbon. Ripples faded until the water became almost glassy, disturbed only by the occasional raindrop that vanished as soon as it appeared. The clock tower felt no need to watch closely now. The village no longer required guidance. Everything had found its place. The bell above remained silent, its presence comforting even without sound. Its weight felt grounding, reassuring. It would ring again when needed, but not now. Now belonged to rest. Time itself seemed to stretch, becoming wide and forgiving. Moments blended into one another, losing their edges, forming a continuous calm. Inside homes, sleepers shifted slightly, then stilled. Breaths deepened, shoulders relaxed, thoughts loosened their hold and drifted away, one by one, like leaves carried off by a gentle stream. The clock tower had seen this countless times, and each time it felt like a small miracle. Not because anything extraordinary happened, but because peace arrived so naturally. The rain slowed even more, spacing its drops carefully, respectfully. Long pauses formed between each soft landing. Silence filled the gaps, not awkwardly, but comfortably. The lantern's light dimmed just a touch, as though sensing it was no longer needed at full strength. Shadows grew longer, softer, blending into one another. The tower's interior felt like the inside of a quiet thought, warm, enclosed, safe. The pendulum slowed again, barely perceptible, its movement now more felt than heard. It was no longer leading the night, only accompanying it. Outside, mist gathered once more, but this time it did not obscure. It softened. It wrapped the village in a thin veil that blurred worries and sharpness alike. Even the clock face seemed to relax, its numbers less defined in the damp air, its hands gliding rather than pointing. Time had become a suggestion rather than a rule. The clock tower accepted this completely. There was nothing left to hold up, nothing left to maintain. The night had taken over. Somewhere, far beyond the village, dawn waited patiently, not yet moving, not yet thinking of arriving. It would come when the night was finished, and not a moment sooner. For now, everything belonged to this gentle pause. The rain, now barely more than a whisper, finally slowed to stillness. Droplets clung to edges and surfaces, trembling slightly, then settling. Silence expanded, not empty, full. The kind of silence that holds you rather than leaving you alone. The clock tower stood in the center of it all, not as a watcher now, but as part of the rest itself. Stone, wood, metal and time all softened into one calm presence. The pendulum made one more quiet arc, then another, each one slower, heavier with peace. Below, the village slept completely now. No movement, no sound, only breath, shared and steady. The rain had done its work, the night had settled, and the clock tower, content and unburdened, allowed time to pass unnoticed. The greatest gift it could offer. Nothing more was needed. Nothing more would come. The night held and held and held, and everything rested. The night does not rush you out of this moment. It stays with you gently, patiently, as if it understands that rest is not something to be forced, but something to be allowed. The quiet clock tower still stands above the village, but you no longer need to picture it clearly. Its shape can soften now, like a memory that feels safe enough to blur at the edges. You don't have to hold on to details. You don't have to follow the ticking of time anymore. Everything that needed to happen has already happened. The rain has eased. The village has settled. The night has wrapped itself fully around the world, and you are held within it. If there were any thoughts lingering earlier, small worries, unfinished conversations, quiet questions, they can drift away now. You don't need to solve them tonight. They can rest somewhere beyond the rooftops, beyond the hills, far from where you are. Here, there is only calm. Your breathing can slow naturally, without instruction, in and out, soft and steady. Each breath feels a little deeper than the last, as though your body remembers how to rest, even if your mind sometimes forgets. The clock tower no longer counts time for you. It keeps watch instead, a quiet, steady presence that says everything is exactly as it should be. The rain-soaked stones of the village streets glisten faintly in memory, then fade. The warm lamplight dims, not because it disappears, but because you no longer need it to see. Darkness here is gentle. It does not hide things. It softens them. You might imagine the village breathing slowly beneath the tower, every home wrapped in sleep, every window dimmed, every thought loosened. Or you might imagine nothing at all, just a feeling of being suspended in stillness. Both are perfect. There is no right way to drift. Time stretches comfortably, becoming wide and forgiving. There is no past pulling at you, no future asking for attention. Only this calm pause floating somewhere between heartbeats. If your body feels heavy, let it. If your mind feels quiet, welcome it. If sleep is already near, you don't need to reach for it. It will come to you. The clock tower stands quietly, not as a reminder of passing hours, but as a promise that nothing important is being missed. Everything that matters knows where to find you when morning comes. For now, rest is your only task. The rain clouds above the village have thinned, leaving the sky soft and open. Stars might be there, or they might not. It doesn't matter. The night is complete either way. Even the idea of movement fades. Even the idea of sound dissolves. There is only a gentle awareness, calm, slow, unguarded. If thoughts try to return, let them pass like distant footsteps that never quite arrive. You don't need to follow them. You don't need to listen. The night understands. The clock tower understands. And most importantly, you are allowed to rest without explanation. Sleep does not need permission. It does not need effort. It arrives when the world becomes quiet enough inside you. So let the last images fade. Let the story release you. Let the night take over where words end. You are safe. You are unhurried. You are held. And as the quiet clock tower keeps its gentle watch above the sleeping village, you can drift slowly, easily into rest, knowing that nothing will disturb you here. Good night.